Some lives collide not by fate but by desperation, when survival demands bargains colder than love and more binding than blood. The clatter of a phone slamming into its cradle echoed through the dimly lit studio as Lena Morgan slid down the wall, her hand shaking. Another no. Another door closed. The medical bills piled across her kitchen table seemed to glare at her with their red final notice stamps. Her mother was running out of time, both in life and before the hospital would cut her off. Across the city, in a high-rise corner office overlooking the Boston Harbor, Julian Hawthorne stared blankly at a fresh set of lab results. Terminal. 12 months, at most. He set the pages down and looked out at the skyline that bore his family name on half a dozen towers. Everything he'd built would default to his cutthroat cousin, Cole, if he didn't act fast. Lena Morgan was gifted, a medical scientist whose work had appeared in top-tier journals, proposing innovative treatments for rare neurodegenerative diseases. But brilliance didn't cover hospital expenses, not the kind tied to her mother's relentless leukemia battle. She was out of money, out of options. Julian Hawthorne had all the wealth in the world, except for time. The 37-year-old biotech mogul had exceeded even his father's legendary legacy. But the old man's trust came with an ironclad clause. Only a Hawthorne with a legal heir could retain majority control of the company. If not, it would all fall to Cole, whose brutal tactics would dismantle everything Julian had spent his life building. Two people, two crises, one outrageous solution that would change both their lives forever. When Julian's sleek black sedan arrived in front of Lena's aging apartment complex that wet Thursday evening, neither could have predicted how a simple contract would unravel, evolve, and ultimately redeem them both. This was supposed to be a business arrangement. Lena adjusted her dress one last time in the chipped mirror above her bathroom sink. Her plain gray sheath dress was the most professional outfit she owned, and she'd pulled her auburn hair into a tidy knot. Whatever this cryptic offer was, she couldn't afford to appear desperate, even if she was. The doorman at Hawthorne Plaza eyed her with clear suspicion as she requested entry to the executive suite level. She didn't fit in here, among the crystal chandeliers and brass elevator panels, but the email had been explicit. Julian Hawthorne wanted to meet her directly. Miss Morgan. Julian didn't rise as his assistant ushered her into his expansive office. His tone was as detached as his slate-colored eyes. Please, sit. Lena sat carefully at the edge of the chair, clutching her resume in both hands. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Hawthorne. I'm not sure what position. This isn't a job interview, Miss Morgan, Julian interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. It's a contract. Inside the folder was something Lena couldn't have imagined. A marriage agreement. 1 year of posing as Julian Hawthorne's wife in exchange for $5 million. This has to be a joke, she murmured, shutting the folder. I don't joke about business, Julian replied, face unreadable. You need funding. I need a wife to satisfy the outdated terms of my grandfather's will. The marriage would be legal in name only, with a clear end after 1 year. Why me? Lena asked, her thoughts spinning. You're intelligent, educated, presentable, and, most critically, desperate enough to consider something like this. Julian's bluntness was almost, in a strange way, a relief. Your mother's medical expenses are over $400,000, and the experimental therapy she needs isn't covered by insurance. Lena's fingers trembled. You've researched me, she said softly. Julian gave a slight nod. I know about your academic background, your published work, your financial hardship. I don't enter into agreements without knowing everything, Miss Morgan. The silence between them thickened until Lena managed to speak again. What would you expect from me during this arrangement? Public appearances, corporate events. You'd reside at my estate, though we'd occupy separate wings. You'll sign non-disclosure agreements and never disclose the nature of our arrangement to anyone. He tapped the folder. The complete terms are detailed there. You have 3 days to decide. Lena rose from the chair, clutching the folder tightly. I'll need time to consider. Of course, Julian replied smoothly, his voice suggesting he already knew what her answer would be. My assistant will escort you out. That evening, Lena sat beside her mother's hospital bed, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. Margaret Morgan had once been so lively, always full of energy and sharp wit. Now cancer had dimmed her spirit, her arms dotted with IV bruises, her voice no louder than a whisper. "Who was your meeting with, sweetheart?" she asked gently. "Just a possible opportunity," Lena said, forcing a smile. "Nothing to worry about." "You seem distant." Her mother pressed, her eyes studying Lena's face with quiet concern. "I'm just tired," Lena replied softly, squeezing her hand. "The doctor mentioned a new trial drug," Margaret said weakly, "but I know it's expensive." "You don't need to worry about that," Lena whispered, her voice cracking. "You're going to get better. I'll make it work." Later that night, Lena laid the contract out across her tiny kitchen table. She read every paragraph, every demand, every deadline. $5 million, enough to cover her mother's treatment, erase her student loans, and still leave her with something to rebuild her life. 1 year. The next morning, as Lena stepped out of the hospital lobby, her phone rang. "Miss Morgan, have you made your decision?" Julian's voice was precise, clipped. Lena paused, watching a young couple pass through the hospital doors, holding the little girl's hands between them. The weight in their eyes mirrored hers. "I have conditions," Lena said firmly. "I want half of the money up front. My mother needs treatment now." A pause. "Acceptable. Anything else?" "I continue my research," she said. "I won't ask you to pause your career, as long as you fulfill your obligations as my wife in public. What you do in private is your business." Lena drew in a steadying breath. "Then we have a deal, Mr. Hawthorne." "Excellent," Julian replied. "The documents will be ready for signing tomorrow. And Miss Morgan?" "Yes?" "Starting tomorrow, you should practice calling me Julian. No one will believe we're married if you keep addressing me that formally." 3 days later, Lena stood inside a clinical courthouse chamber, exchanging vows with a man she barely knew. There were no flowers, no music, no family or friends, just a judge, 2 stone-faced witnesses from Julian's legal team, and a cold string of phrases that legally bound them together. Julian slid a plain platinum band onto her finger. It felt unfamiliar, weighted not by emotion but by contract. He didn't kiss her when the judge pronounced them husband and wife. He simply gave a curt nod, as if finalizing a boardroom deal. "The car will take you to pack your belongings," he said as they exited. "Renee will help you get settled in. I have meetings the rest of the afternoon." Renee, Julian's assistant, didn't bother hiding her contempt as she gave Lena a brisk tour of the Hawthorne estate later that day. "Your suite is in the East Wing," she said, walking Lena through hallways lined with curated oil paintings and marble statues. "Mr. Hawthorne resides in the West Wing. He won't be disturbed." The suite was easily 4 times the size of Lena's old apartment, furnished with a bedroom, a lounge, a private bathroom, and a study she could use for research. "Dinner is at 7, Renee added. "Mr. Hawthorne usually eats alone in his study, but you're expected to be available for public events, often with little notice." She opened the wardrobe. It was filled with luxury designer pieces, clothing, shoes, and accessories, all in Lena's size. "I didn't agree to a makeover," Lena said flatly. "You agreed to be believable," Renee countered without flinching. "No one's going to buy that Julian Hawthorne's wife shops off the rack." That evening, Lena ate alone at the far end of a cavernous formal dining room, the butler moving in and out with mechanical grace, delivering course after course to a single plate. It felt less like a home and more like a museum, cold, distant, curated. Later, restless in a bed too soft and too large, she wandered the quiet corridors of her new life. $5 million, she whispered to herself. Just 1 year. She could survive anything for a year. Her footsteps led her to a dimly lit library, where she was surprised to find Julian still up, seated behind a desk and flipping through documents. "I'm sorry," she said, stepping back. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Julian looked up. "It's technically your home now, too, though I assumed you'd be asleep by now." "It's not like what I'm used to." She gestured vaguely at the room around them. For a brief moment, something real flickered across his features. "It takes time," he said. "I grew up here. Sometimes it still feels too quiet." Lena stepped in cautiously. "Were you close with your grandfather, the one who wrote the will?" Julian's expression tightened. "He raised me after my parents died. He was a complex man. And your cousin, Cole, is not a subject up for discussion." Julian returned his gaze to the papers. "We have our first public event tomorrow night, a benefit gala for the Children's Cancer Center. The car will pick you up at 7. Lena recognized a dismissal when she heard one. Good night, then, Julian. His name felt unfamiliar in her mouth, strangely personal in a way their courthouse vows had not been. Good night, Lena. It was the first time he'd used her first name as well. The next evening, Lena stared at her reflection in a deep sapphire gown that surely cost more than half a year's rent from her old life. Her hair had been styled by a professional sent to the estate, and the diamond necklace resting just above her collarbone glittered with every breath she took. A stranger looked back at her from the mirror, polished, poised, expensive. Yet beneath the silk and sparkle, her pulse fluttered with a nervous energy she hadn't felt in years. Not even before her thesis defense had she felt so exposed. You clean up well, Julian said as she descended the grand staircase. He was dressed in a sharply tailored tuxedo that highlighted his tall, elegant build. Thank you, Lena replied, suddenly self-conscious. Is that the kind of thing a real husband would say? A ghost of a smirk tugged at his lips. Perhaps not. Let's try again. He took her hand and raised it to his lips in a gesture so smooth it had to be rehearsed, yet it still sent a ripple of something uninvited down her spine. You look beautiful tonight, darling. Lena swallowed. Much better. Very believable. But her heart beat unevenly in her chest, and she hated that she couldn't tell whether it was performance or reaction. In the car, Julian went over the guest list, preparing her for the introductions they'd face at the gala, reviewing the narrative they had crafted together. We met at a biomedical conference, Lena recited quietly. You were intrigued by my research. We dated in private for 6 months, then got engaged and married quickly. And why the rush? Julian prompted. She gave a small, rehearsed smile. Because life is short, and we didn't want to wait. The irony hung between them for a second. Undeniable, given his terminal diagnosis. Outside the gala entrance, camera flashes lit up the steps like lightning. Julian placed a guiding hand on the small of Lena's back, possessive in a way that was entirely for the cameras, and yet, something about it felt genuinely grounding. Julian, congratulations on the wedding. A silver-haired man approached with a champagne flute in hand. You kept this whole thing so quiet, the society pages had to guess. Some things are too precious for the press, Senator, Julian replied with practiced charm, pulling Lena just a bit closer. Lena, this is Senator Michael Whitlow, longtime family friend. Senator, my wife, Dr. Lena Morgan Hawthorne. A doctor? Impressive, the senator replied, studying her with frank curiosity. What's your field, my dear? Medical research, Lena answered confidently, focused on rare genetic disorders and emerging therapies. Fascinating, the senator nodded. His wife joined them. And how did you two meet? Julian's always been so absorbed in business. Lena felt Julian's hand gently press at her waist, a non-verbal cue to take over. She smiled and slipped effortlessly into the version of their love story they'd scripted together, telling it with such ease that by the 4th or 5th time, even she started believing the emotion in her own voice. The warmth in Julian's palm as it lingered at her back, the way his eyes rested on her during her answers, it was too consistent, too careful. If it was all an act, it was the most convincing one she'd ever seen. And if it wasn't, she didn't know what that meant. As the night wore on, Lena watched Julian in his element. Cold and private at home, but in public, he transformed. Charismatic, effortless, magnetic. People leaned in when he spoke. They smiled wider when he looked their way. They angled for his time, his approval, his funding. Does your face hurt yet from smiling? Lena whispered when they finally had a moment alone. Julian's eyes crinkled faintly. Occupational hazard. You're good at it. So are you, he murmured. Senator Whitlow's wife is already half in love with our fairy tale. It helps, Lena said softly, that some of it's actually true. I am a researcher, after all. Yes, your qualifications were one of the reasons you were a strong candidate. Julian stopped mid-sentence, his expression suddenly going slack, color draining from his face. Julian? Lena instinctively reached for his arm. Are you okay? I'm fine, he said tightly, but she could see the thin layer of sweat forming across his brow. No, you're not, she pressed, gently steering him toward a quiet alcove tucked behind the ballroom bar. When did you last take your medication? Surprise flickered in his eyes. How did you? I read medical journals for fun, she said softly. and I've been studying your conditions since we signed the agreement." Lena kept her voice low, steady. "The tremor in your left hand, the intermittent pallor, these are textbook symptoms." "This is neither the time nor the place," Julian snapped, voice clipped. "If you won't take care of yourself," Lena countered calmly, "our contract might end sooner than expected, which kind of defeats the whole purpose, doesn't it?" For a moment something unguarded passed across Julian's features. Irritation, maybe even vulnerability. Then his composure returned, expression once again unreadable. "We're leaving," he said abruptly, taking her arm and leading her out through the nearest exit. In the car, silence hung between them like a fog until Julian finally broke it. "My health isn't your concern." "It is," Lena said simply. "If it jeopardizes our arrangement." She turned toward him. "More than that, it's what I do. My entire career is dedicated to helping people manage conditions like yours. I have the best physicians money can buy, and yet you're ignoring their instructions, aren't you?" she said. Julian didn't reply. Lena exhaled slowly. "Look, I'm not trying to invade your privacy, but we're tied together for the next year. I'd prefer not to become a widow before the contract ends." To her surprise, Julian let out a short laugh, sharp, real, the kind that made him look far less like the icy tycoon he usually was. "That would be inconvenient, wouldn't it?" "Extremely," Lena said, cracking a smile. "And I'd have to wear black. Not really my best color." Julian looked over at her then, really looked, like he hadn't expected concern from her, much less humor. Something about her presence calmed the frayed edge of panic he rarely acknowledged, even to himself. The silence that followed was different, less tense, more reflective. "The treatment options are limited," Julian said at last, staring out the window. "And the side effects aren't exactly pleasant." Lena heard the subtext clearly, a rare moment of honesty. "Have you looked into the experimental trials at the Mercer Institute? Dr. Prauholm's lab is doing cutting-edge work with gene-based therapy." "I'm familiar with Holm's publications," Julian said. "It's promising, but it's still years out from being viable." "Not necessarily," Lena said, leaning forward as curiosity took over. "I was at a conference in Cambridge last month where she presented her Phase 2 trial results. The new delivery system has drastically improved cell uptake and minimized immune rejection." Julian studied her with unexpected interest. "You track experimental genetic therapies closely. For someone whose academic background isn't technically in genetics, it's a personal interest," Lena said carefully, not wanting to disclose too much about her mother's illness. For a moment, her gaze dropped and she added quietly, "Sometimes proximity to pain becomes purpose." Julian didn't reply, but the muscle in his jaw flexed once. "The point is, there might be options you haven't fully explored." "Perhaps," Julian replied, his tone non-committal, but something in his expression had shifted. "I'll have my medical team review the updated research." As the car pulled up to the estate's circular driveway, he turned toward her. "You handled yourself well tonight." The foundation director was especially impressed. It wasn't quite a thank you. But coming from Julian Hawthorne, Lena figured it was probably the closest thing to one. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Lena had established a rhythm. Her mornings were spent at the hospital with her mother, whose condition had begun to stabilize, thanks to the treatments Lena could now afford. Afternoons went to her research, either conducted in the quiet of her private study or back at her old university lab. Evenings were often filled with charity galas, board dinners, or public appearances, where she took her place beside Julian as Mrs. Hawthorne, her confidence in the role growing steadily. Julian remained largely a mystery, always civil, never cruel, but emotionally distant. He rarely joined her for meals or casual conversation unless it was required for appearances. Some days she didn't see him at all, and that suited her just fine. This was a contract, not a love story. Yet, as the days passed, Lena couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider in her own life. The grandeur of the estate, the opulence of the events, and the constant presence of strangers made her feel like a guest rather than a resident. She often found herself retreating to her room, seeking solace in solitude, questioning her place in this arrangement, until one night when she once again found herself unable to sleep. Restless, she wandered to the estate library. This time, Julian wasn't at his desk. Instead, he was in a leather armchair, a thick hardcover open but ignored in his lap. His gaze was locked on the fire, lost in thought. He didn't notice her until she was nearly next to him. "Sorry," Lena said, stepping back. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not," Julian replied, closing the book. "I wasn't really reading anyway." Lena noticed a slight tremor in his hand as he placed the book aside. "Rough night?" "I've had better," he admitted, surprisingly candid. He motioned to the chair across from him. "Since you're here, I've been meaning to ask how your mother is responding to the new treatment." Taken aback by his interest, Lena sat down. "Better than we hoped. Her doctors are cautiously optimistic." "That's good," Julian nodded. "And your research? Renee mentioned you've been back at the lab more often." "We've had promising results," Lena said, then hesitated. "We've been refining the delivery mechanism for our latest gene therapy vectors. Early trials are encouraging." She paused, offering a small smile. "Sorry, I doubt you want the technical rundown." "On the contrary," Julian said, leaning in slightly. "My condition is genetic, as you've likely gathered. Your work is directly relevant." Lena studied him closely. "Is that why you picked me? Not just because I was in need, but because of my research?" "It factored in," Julian said, though it wasn't the deciding reason. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a crackle of sparks. In the shifting glow, Lena noticed how tired he looked, the lines around his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. "The pain's worse at night, isn't it?" she asked softly. Julian looked at her, and for once didn't hide the truth. "Yes." "Have you tried mindfulness techniques?" she asked. "There are specific neural regulation approaches, non-pharmacological, that can help manage chronic pain." "I've tried everything," he said, voice flat. "From ancient breathing rituals to cutting-edge neurostimulation devices. Nothing works for long." Lena reached out for his hand, the one that trembled. After a brief hesitation, Julian extended it. Her fingers were cool as she gently turned his palm upward, applying slow, deliberate pressure to specific points on his wrist and palm. "This isn't mysticism," she said, noticing his skeptical glance. "It's based on nerve pathways and circulation flow. My father's pain management specialist taught me." Under her steady touch, the tremor began to fade. Julian watched her silently, his expression unreadable. "Better?" she asked, suddenly aware of how close, how unguarded the moment felt. "Yes," he said softly. "Thank you." She released his hand and stood. "I should get to bed. I've got early hours at the lab tomorrow." "Lena?" Julian called as she reached the doorway. "Your mother's lucky to have you." It was the first genuine personal compliment he'd offered, not for appearances, not for anyone else's ears. The next morning, Lena found a folder outside her suite. Inside were detailed medical documents related to Julian's condition. Full genetic sequencing, treatment histories, neurodegeneration charts. On top was a handwritten note in his sharp, precise script. "Your professional opinion would be valued." Between her own work, Lena spent the day poring over every page. Julian's diagnosis was a rare hereditary neurological disorder, painful, degenerative, and always fatal. Most patients didn't survive more than 3 to 5 years after symptom onset. Julian had already passed the 2-year mark. That evening, she knocked on the door to his study. "Come in," his voice called. Lena stepped inside, holding the folder and her annotated notes. "I've reviewed everything," she said. Julian motioned toward the chair across from him. "And? I think your team is being too cautious," she replied directly. "There are at least 3 experimental treatments that haven't been explored." His brows lifted slightly at her bluntness. "They all come with substantial risk." "So does standing still," Lena replied, spreading her pages across the desk. "Dr. Huang's protocol, in particular, shows measurable progress in similar gene variants. The published success rate is 30%, which is 30% better than doing nothing." Julian leaned back, quietly observing her. "You've been managing symptoms, managing decline, not fighting progression." Most people tiptoed around him when discussing his illness. Lena didn't. He found himself listening more closely. "This isn't just professional for me," she added more quietly. "If something happened to you before our agreement ends, my mother's treatment might not be protected." A faint smile crossed his lips. "Practical, as always." "It's how I've gotten this far," Lena admitted. Julian nodded slowly. "I'll consider Dr. Huang's approach on one condition." "What's that?" You consult directly with my medical team going forward. Your insight appears to be worth more than they'd assumed. It was the closest Julian Hawthorne had likely ever come to asking for help. Lena gave a small nod. I can do that. In the weeks that followed, a new pattern formed. Lena began joining Julian's medical briefings, offering input and translating cutting-edge research into tangible next steps. As the weeks progressed, Julian began showing real interest in Lena's research, sometimes asking pointed questions that revealed a surprisingly nuanced understanding of genetic theory. Their evenings in the library became something of a routine. Sometimes they discussed developments in medicine. Other nights passed in shared silence, both immersed in their own work or reading by the fire. Lena found herself unexpectedly anticipating those hours, the only time Julian seemed to shed the layers of corporate control and let parts of the real man emerge. Why did you choose business over medicine? She asked him one evening. You have a better grasp of genetic science than most med students I've met. Julian's expression turned inward. My grandfather made that decision for me. The heir to Hawthorne Enterprises runs the company. Period. But you majored in biology, right? She pressed. At least for 2 years before you switched tracks. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass slowly. He told me that if I continued down the pre-med path, I'd forfeit my claim to the business entirely. That wasn't a warning. It was a promise. And now, Lena said gently, you're dying of a genetic illness. There's a certain irony in that. Yes. Julian's smile was thin and bitter. Although had I become a doctor, maybe I'd be where you are. Brilliant, but constantly underfunded. Lena chuckled. Touché. Though I'd still take meaningful work over wealth. Most days. Says the woman who married for money, Julian said, though his tone was light, absent of mockery. Technically, Lena said, lifting her teacup, I married for my mother's survival, not the money itself. Julian studied her. You love her deeply. She's everything, Lena said simply. After my dad passed, she raised me alone. Worked nights, cleaned houses, helped me get through med school. She never once complained. When I landed my first grant, you'd think she won the Nobel Prize. She sounds like a good woman. The best. There was a pause before Lena asked, what about your parents? You've never mentioned them. Julian's face went still. They died when I was 7, car crash. I'm sorry, Lena said softly. My grandfather raised me and Cole. Your cousin? Julian nodded. He had different expectations for each of us. Cole got freedom, I got responsibility. And now he wants your company. He wants everything, Julian corrected. He always has. And now he might actually get it, unless this arrangement gives the board what it's waiting for. Lena shifted, reminded again of the cold reality behind their contract. Well, she said, grasping for something practical, if the new protocol works, your prognosis could improve. You might live long enough to find a more lasting solution. Julian's gaze met hers, unreadable. Perhaps. He stood abruptly. It's late. You should get some rest. The dismissal stung in a way it wouldn't have just a few weeks ago. Lena stood, collecting her papers. Good night, then. Lena, Julian called as she reached the door. Thank you for working with my doctors. It's appreciated. She nodded once and left the study, unsettled by how genuine his gratitude had sounded and how much it warmed something in her she hadn't expected. The annual Hawthorne Foundation Gala arrived 6 weeks into their marriage. It was the most high-profile event on their shared calendar. Hundreds of guests, extensive media coverage, and Julian's first major public appearance since the wedding. Lena stood in front of her full-length mirror, adjusting the crimson gown that clung to her frame like second skin. She hardly recognized the woman staring back at her, poised, elegant, every inch the partner to one of the most powerful men in Boston. Renee had arranged for her hair to be swept into a meticulous updo, adorned with ruby and diamond drop earrings that sparkled like fire. They matched the stunning engagement ring now paired with her simple wedding band, a new addition delivered that morning in a velvet box. For optics, Julian had said matter-of-factly as he slid the box across the breakfast table, the media will expect something noticeable. The weight of the ring matched the pressure of the evening. More than any appearance so far, tonight had to feel real. Julian stood at the base of the estate's grand staircase in a flawless tuxedo. When his eyes met hers, something shifted in his gaze. Surprise, maybe even admiration. You look, he began, then paused as if the words weren't quite sufficient. The dress suits you. Very convincing, darling, Lena said with a smirk, slipping easily into their public routine. The press will definitely believe you're head over heels with that level of enthusiasm. To her surprise, Julian laughed, a genuine quiet sound that softened the edges of his usual reserve. Fair point. Let me try again. He took her hand, drawing her in. You're breathtaking tonight, Lena. Every man there will envy me. His voice had a weight to it, something warmer, deeper than their usual scripted performance. Lena's breath caught slightly. Much better, she said. Very believable. The gala was held in the atrium of Hawthorne Enterprises, which had been transformed into a shimmering, celestial wonderland. Lights cascaded like stars from the high ceiling, and soft floral arrangements lined every edge of the room. As hosts, Lena and Julian stood at the entrance for over an hour, greeting guests. Her arm rested naturally inside his. Mrs. Hawthorne, you've done the impossible, one elderly board member said with a wink. Julian actually smiles now. She's good for him, his wife chimed in. We thought he'd married the company itself. Julian's hand slid over Lena's, his thumb brushing gently against her knuckles. The gesture felt unexpectedly real. I just needed the right partner, he said, looking at Lena with something she couldn't quite name. As the night continued, they moved through the crowd seamlessly. Julian kept her close, his hand often resting at her back or wrapping around hers, as though the contact grounded him. Are you okay? Lena whispered during a brief lull between greetings. You seem different tonight. Just playing the role, Julian replied evenly. But something in his eyes said otherwise. Dinner was served at circular tables beneath a canopy of twinkling lights. The ceiling above the ballroom mimicked a night sky, an illusion of stars that made the whole room feel enchanted. Julian rose from his seat to deliver his address, thanking supporters and reflecting on the Hawthorne Foundation's work. Toward the end, his voice shifted. This year has brought unexpected change into my life, he said, his gaze landing on Lena. Changes that have helped me look beyond quarterly reports and corporate strategy to what truly matters. His tone softened. My wife has reminded me that the greatest legacy we can leave isn't measured in buildings or portfolios, but in the lives we touch and the good we leave behind. A warm wave of applause swept through the room as Julian returned to his seat. Under the table, Lena felt his hand reach for hers. That wasn't in the draft Renee gave you, she whispered. No, Julian agreed quietly. It wasn't. After dinner, dancing began. Julian offered his hand and Lena allowed him to guide her onto the floor for the first waltz of the evening. One hand rested at her waist, the other held hers with an unexpected gentleness. I didn't know you could dance, Lena murmured as he moved effortlessly through the steps. All Hawthorns are taught ballroom dancing by age 12, Julian replied. Grandfather's rule. What else did he dictate? Lena asked, genuinely curious about the rigid upbringing that had shaped him. A flicker of something darker passed across Julian's face. Everything, from where we went to school to how we spent our summers. Cole pushed back. I didn't. And now you're the CEO. Lena observed, and he's not. Julian's mouth twisted slightly. And now I'm dying, he said quietly, and he's not. Maybe rebellion was the smarter path. The music swelled and Julian pulled her a little closer, his cheek brushing against her temple. You smell like jasmine, he murmured. Lena's breath caught. It's the perfume Renee picked. Is it too strong? It's perfect, Julian said softly. You're perfect. The words were quiet, meant only for her. No cameras, no audience. Just them. Lena's pulse quickened. This wasn't the performance anymore. Julian, she began, unsure what she was even trying to say. Whatever spell had settled around them shattered with a voice, cool and familiar. Well, brother, aren't you going to introduce me to your bride? Julian tensed, his expression hardening as he turned to face the speaker. I wasn't aware you'd be attending, he said. Cole Hawthorne shared his cousin's dark features and height, but where Julian was controlled and deliberate, Cole oozed charm that felt calculated, performative. I couldn't miss the woman who did what half the debutantes in Boston failed to, Cole said, letting his gaze travel slowly over Lena. Now I understand. She's stunning. Lena, this is my cousin, Cole Hawthorne, Julian said, voice formal. Cole, my wife, Dr. Lena Morgan Hawthorne. A doctor? Cole lifted a brow. reaching for her hand and bringing it to his lips in a gesture that lingered too long. Brains and beauty. Julian always did have a taste for the full package. Lena pulled her hand back, the dislike instantaneous. Nice to meet you, Cole. Julian's told me so much. Terrible things, I'm sure, Cole laughed. Don't believe most of it. My cousin has always seen the worst in me. Maybe because you've always shown it, Julian said evenly. If you'll excuse us, we need to greet the mayor. Cole's smile didn't waver. Of course. Don't let me keep you from your duties, Cole said smoothly. We'll have plenty of time to get better acquainted. I'm family, after all. As he disappeared into the crowd, Lena felt the shift in Julian's posture, the tension radiating off him. I take it you and your cousin aren't exactly close, she said. Cole and I have fundamentally different values, Julian said tightly. He sees people as tools, means to an end, disposable. And you don't? The question escaped before Lena could catch herself, heavy with the unspoken truth of their arrangement. Julian stopped, turning to face her fully. Is that what you think? He asked. That I see you as a tool? Lena held his gaze. Isn't that what our contract is? I'm useful to you. Something flickered in Julian's expression. Not anger, not annoyance. Something closer to hurt? It started that way, he said quietly. But things change. Before Lena could ask what that meant, Renee appeared at Julian's side. Mr. Hawthorne, the senator would like a moment regarding the new grant program. Julian gave a nod, the mask of formality sliding neatly back into place. Duty calls, he said to Lena. Will you be all right for a few minutes? Of course, she replied. I'll get some air on the terrace. The night was cool outside, a sharp contrast to the warmth and noise of the ballroom. Lena leaned against the stone railing, trying to sort the tangle of emotions twisting in her chest. This was supposed to be a business transaction, just a contract. She couldn't afford to forget that, no matter how different Julian had seemed tonight. Escaping already? The voice behind her was unmistakable. Cole, the dutiful wife routine must be exhausting. Lena turned, schooling her face into polite neutrality. Just getting some air. Your cousin doesn't exactly need my help entertaining a crowd. Cole stepped closer, too close. Julian is many things, but charming host? Not one of them. Cold, strategic, calculating, much more accurate. You don't know him as well as you think, Lena said, stepping subtly to the side to create space. I've known him all my life, Cole chuckled. That's why I'm curious. This whole whirlwind marriage? Julian doesn't do emotion. So what's your play? Money? Social clout? Or do you just like bagging the city's most unattainable man? I love your cousin, Lena said, her voice steady. The lie came easier than expected. That's the only thing that matters. Love, Cole repeated mockingly. How quaint. He took another step forward. Tell me, does my dying cousin know about your pet project? The gene editing research you're desperate to push forward? A chill went through Lena, unrelated to the night air. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Cole's grin turned predatory. Your work on CRISPR therapies for hereditary neurological disorders, the exact field Julian's condition falls into. Very convenient timing, your sudden marriage. Lena's heart pounded. You've been investigating me. I'm just protecting the family, Cole shrugged. Julian might be blinded by whatever it is you've got going for you, but I'm not. Whatever you think you know. I know enough, he cut her off. Enjoy your moment, Mrs. Hawthorne. It won't last. With that, he turned and sauntered back inside, leaving Lena frozen. She stood alone for several minutes, steadying her breath, before finally gathering herself and returning to the gala. She spotted Julian speaking with several board members, his expression composed, focused. But when he saw her, something in his demeanor shifted. His eyes softened. Without hesitation, he extended his hand and drew her to his side. So naturally it felt like they'd been married for years, instead of mere weeks. Everything all right? He murmured, even as the conversation continued around them. Fine, Lena replied, offering a small smile. Just a little overwhelmed by it all. Julian's arm slipped around her waist, steadying, not possessive. We can head out soon, he promised quietly. You've more than fulfilled your role tonight. As their car pulled away from the gala, Lena leaned back into the leather seat, drained by the emotional swings of the evening. You were incredible tonight, Julian said softly. Everyone was drawn to you. Even your cousin? Lena asked, unable to resist. Julian's expression darkened. Especially him. A pause. What did he say to you on the terrace? Nothing important, Lena lied, unwilling to add tension. Just trying to provoke me. Maybe it runs in the family. To her surprise, Julian let out a dry laugh. Touché, though I hope I'm a little more subtle about it. They pulled into the estate's driveway. The tires crunched softly over the gravel, but neither of them made a move to get out. Thank you, Julian said at last. For tonight? For everything, he clarified. The consultations, the conversations, these past few weeks, it's been far less miserable than I expected. Much less, Lena echoed with a faint smile. In fact, Julian added, I found myself looking forward to our evenings. Lena's heartbeat quickened at the admission. Me too, she whispered. Silence stretched between them, comfortable, charged, unspoken things hanging in the air. Then Julian moved to open his door. It's late, he said. You must be exhausted. Julian, Lena said impulsively, placing a hand on his arm, stopping him. What you said in your speech about what matters most, did you mean it? He looked back at her, their eyes locking in the dim light of the cabin. Yes, he said simply. I'm starting to see things differently. Their faces were close, his breath mingled with hers. And then Lena felt herself lean in, drawn by something she wasn't ready to define. Julian's eyes dropped briefly to her lips, then rose again to meet hers. Lena, he whispered, her name a question. She answered with a kiss, tentative at first but deepening as Julian cupped her face, pulling her in. When they finally pulled apart, their breaths were uneven. Julian rested his forehead against hers. This wasn't in the contract, he murmured. No, Lena agreed. It wasn't. They walked into the house together, his hand at the small of her back guiding her, not toward their separate suites, but toward the library. The fire was already glowing low in the hearth. Julian poured them both a glass of brandy, handing one to her. To unexpected developments, he said, raising his glass. To breaking contract terms, Lena replied with a quiet smile, taking a sip and feeling the heat spread through her. Julian set his glass down and stepped closer. I should have said something weeks ago, he murmured. Things changed for me. He looked at her, unflinching. You changed them. What things? Lena asked, her heart thudding in her chest. How you see this arrangement? How you see me? Julian's fingers brushed lightly along her cheek. You're brilliant, compassionate, stronger than anyone I've ever met, he said quietly. And I catch myself thinking about you when you're not there, missing you when you're gone. Lena swallowed hard. That sounds dangerously close to real emotion, Mr. Hawthorne. Terrifying, isn't it? Julian's smile was faint, almost self-deprecating. I've spent most of my life avoiding emotional complications. They're messy, unpredictable. And yet here we are, Lena murmured, setting her glass aside and stepping closer to him. Here we are, he echoed, hands settling at her waist, breaking every rule. This time, when they kissed, there was nothing restrained or tentative about it. Weeks of unspoken tension, longing, and connection collided, leaving them both breathless. Julian's hands tangled in her hair, scattering the carefully placed pins until her updo collapsed around her shoulders. Lena's fingers worked at his tie, slipping his jacket from his shoulders, needing to be closer, needing him. Wait, Julian whispered, pulling back just slightly, breath unsteady. I need you to understand, this isn't part of the contract. You don't owe me anything. Lena's chest ached at the sincerity in his voice. I know, she said softly. This has nothing to do with our arrangement, or expectations. This is just us. Something close to wonder flickered across Julian's face, just before he kissed her again. He lifted her easily, carrying her toward the one part of the house she'd never entered, his private suite. Later, lying tangled in the sheets of Julian's bed, her head resting against his chest, Lena tried to make sense of the shift between them. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, his breathing slow, relaxed. As he slept, she traced her finger lightly over a scar on his shoulder, one she'd noted in his medical files from an early surgery. This changed everything. Their contract, her research, her feelings. Lena lay awake, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. The warmth of Julian's embrace was comforting, yet her mind was clouded with doubt. Was this genuine affection, or a fleeting moment, born out of loneliness? She feared that her own feelings were becoming entangled in a relationship that was never meant to be real. Julian might think he was falling for her, but would he still feel the same if he knew everything? If he knew the real reason she had chosen her research path, her connection to the very condition he suffered from, her own genetic legacy. Slipping from the bed, Lena quietly gathered her clothes and returned to her suite. Tomorrow would need clarity, honesty. Tonight had been extraordinary, but morning would demand reality. She didn't see Julian the next day. Instead, a note arrived with her breakfast tray. Emergency board meeting. I'll be back late. Relieved for the temporary distance, Lena spent her day at the hospital with her mother, whose improving health remained her one uncomplicated source of joy. But when she returned to the estate that evening, Renee was waiting at the top of the stairs, her posture stiff, expression unreadable. "Mr. Hawthorne requests your presence in his study," she said coolly. Lena's stomach twisted. Had he regretted last night? Was this the part where he reminded her what their relationship really was? She forced herself to stay composed as she made her way to Julian's study, knocking gently before stepping in. He was standing at the window, back to her, the dusky light outlining his silhouette. He didn't turn. "Julian?" Lena asked softly. "Is everything okay?" "How long?" he said, his voice flat. "Have you been researching my specific genetic disorder?" Lena froze. The question hit like a blow. "Since we made this arrangement, I told you?" "No," Julian interrupted, turning sharply. His face had hardened. "How long before our arrangement?" "I don't understand," Lena said, confused. "Don't lie to me," Julian snapped. He flung the folder onto the desk between them. The pages fanned out, grant proposals, research abstracts, clinical targets, all of it, he said coldly. "Your grant applications, your research focus, all dating back 3 years, and every bit of it centered on the exact genetic mutation I carry." Lena felt her blood run cold. "Where did you get those?" "Does it matter?" Julian's voice was flat. "What matters is that you've been lying from the beginning." "That's not true," Lena said quickly. "Yes, I've been studying your condition. But you didn't think to mention it?" His voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. "Not once during our medical discussions? Not when I asked why you chose this field?" "It's complicated," Lena said, her voice faltering. "Then simplify it for me." Julian's tone cut like ice. "Explain how my dying cousin just happens to marry a researcher whose work aligns exactly with his disorder. Explain the funding applications, rejected repeatedly. Explain how that timeline lines up perfectly with your father's illness and mounting debt." Lena swallowed hard, her stomach twisting. "Cole told you," she whispered. "Cole showed me proof," Julian said. "He suspected something wasn't right about our whirlwind romance, and he was right." "And you believe him over me?" Lena asked, pain welling in her chest. "After everything, after all these weeks? What am I supposed to believe?" Julian's eyes were unreadable. That it's all just fate? That the universe magically aligned a billionaire dying of a rare genetic disorder with the one underfunded scientist desperate enough to marry for money, who also just so happens to specialize in his exact disease? "You're right," Lena said quietly. "It's not coincidence, but you're wrong about my motives." "Then enlighten me," Julian said coldly. "I chose this research," Lena said, her voice trembling but steady, "because it runs in my family. My mother died of the same condition you have. It's genetic. My father didn't carry it, but I might, and if I do, any children I have might too." Julian's expression faltered slightly. "I've dedicated my life to this," Lena continued. "Not just for strangers, but for myself, for my future children. I didn't seek you out. I didn't even know who you were until your proposal arrived. But yes, when I found out what you had, it felt like maybe some good could come of this arrangement. Something beyond just money." "And you didn't tell me?" Julian said, his voice low. "Because?" "Because it wasn't relevant to our contract," Lena shot back. "Because my medical history is mine. Because I didn't want you thinking I married you just to study you." "Didn't you?" Julian asked. His voice sliced through the air. "Last night, was that part of your research too? A chance to get closer to the subject?" The accusation hit like a punch. Lena stepped back, tears springing to her eyes. "How dare you?" she whispered. "Last night had nothing to do with research, or funding, or contracts. It was real, at least for me." Julian's jaw clenched, emotion flickering behind his eyes. "I think it's best," he said slowly, "if we revert to our original arrangement. Separate lives, public appearances only. The contract stands, but anything personal ends now." Lena nodded stiffly, blinking back tears. "If that's what you want." It's what makes sense, Julian replied. Business, not emotion. That was always the agreement. Right, Lena whispered, just business. She turned to go, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I never lied about the things that mattered, Lena said quietly. I care about you, Julian. Not the money, not the genetics. You. She didn't wait for a response. The remaining months of their contract passed in distant formality. In public, Lena and Julian played their roles perfectly. Charming, elegant, inseparable. But behind closed doors, they returned to separate lives. Lena poured herself into research and her mother's care. Julian buried himself in board meetings and experimental therapies, one of which, under Dr. Wong's direction, seemed to be working. Slowly, his condition stabilized. His prognosis stretched from months to possibly years. But the silence between them settled like dust, undisturbed and heavy. In the rare moments they crossed paths, a polite nod or restrained word replaced what had once been sharp banter or tentative warmth. As the final date of their contract approached, Julian's attorneys prepared the paperwork. Lena would receive the rest of the payment, sign updated confidentiality agreements, and vanish from Julian Hawthorne's life, just as the agreement outlined. On their last day as husband and wife, Lena sat across from him in his study, reviewing the papers. Julian looked stronger than he had in months, color back in his cheeks, the fatigue around his eyes softened. Everything seems in order, Lena said, voice formal as she signed the final page. Is there anything else? Julian slid an envelope across the desk. Your final payment, as agreed. Lena stared at it, but she didn't take it. I've been thinking about that, she said quietly. I don't want the full amount. Julian's brow rose. The contract. I know what it says, Lena cut in gently, but I only need enough to cover my mother's remaining treatment. The rest, she pushed the envelope back toward him, put it toward the foundation, or Dr. Huang's trial. It'll do more good there. Julian studied her, expression unreadable. Why? Lena held his gaze. Because taking more than I need would make this into something it wasn't. Because if I took it all, it would feel like the whole year was just transactional. And it wasn't, not for me. Something flickered behind Julian's eyes. Regret, maybe, or something deeper. Lena, don't. We've said what needed saying, she said softly but firmly. You honored your part, I honored mine. A clean break, just like we planned. Julian gave a single nod, adjusting the envelope to reflect the reduced amount. The divorce will be filed first thing tomorrow. Renee has a car waiting to take you wherever you'd like. Thank you. Lena rose slowly, smoothing her skirt with hands that shook just slightly. Her heart beat loud in her ears. This was it. The end of the strangest, most unexpected year of her life. I hope the treatment keeps working, she said gently. And I hope you find peace, Julian. Happiness, you deserve that. She meant it. Even now, especially now. For just a second the mask slipped. Julian's face showed something raw, vulnerable. So do you, he said quietly. She nodded once and turned to leave. Lena, Julian called just as she reached the door. For what it's worth, not all of it was business for me either. Lena closed her eyes, holding the words in her chest. Goodbye, Julian. She walked out, not looking back. A single tear slid down her cheek. 3 months after the divorce, Lena sat in the doctor's office, staring at the ultrasound image in stunned silence. You're approximately 14 weeks along, Dr. Chen was saying gently. Everything looks healthy so far. Would you like to know the gender? Lena nodded slowly, still processing the reality that a life, his child, was growing inside her. A life created during that one night with Julian, before everything had fallen apart. It's a girl, Dr. Chen smiled. Congratulations. A daughter. Julian's daughter. Lena instinctively placed a protective hand over her still flat belly, her thoughts racing to the genetic legacy this child might carry. The same disorder that had taken her mother and nearly taken Julian. I'd like to schedule additional genetic testing, Lena said, her researcher's mind already running through possible risks and protocols. Of course, Dr. Chen nodded. Given your family history, that's a very reasonable request. Lena walked out of the clinic in a haze, one question gnawing at her relentlessly. Should I tell him? Julian had a right to know. But their ending had been final, sharp and cold, cracked by mistrust. He had been recovering, thriving, rebuilding. Would news of a child, his child, who might carry his fatal genetic mutation, be a gift or a devastating burden? The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest, making each step toward the taxi feel heavier. She imagined his expression, cool, impassive, maybe even resentful. Or worse, hurt. The one thing she couldn't bear was adding more pain to a man who'd already carried so much. In the end, Lena chose what she believed was best for everyone. She would raise her daughter alone, free from the weight of the Hawthorne name, untouched by corporate war and legacy expectations. She would keep researching, fighting for treatments that might protect her child if symptoms emerged. But she would not contact Julian. Not now. Maybe not ever. 5 years later, Lena sat in a hospital waiting room clutching a tattered teddy bear, eyes flicking anxiously to the clock. Behind closed doors, her daughter Lily was undergoing neurological testing. Lena already knew. The signs had been small. Subtle tremors, fatigue, minor coordination lapses that most wouldn't notice in a spirited 5-year-old. But Lena had noticed. She had been waiting for them. The specialist had remained cautiously optimistic. If it's the condition, it seems to be a milder strain, and treatments have advanced considerably. Lena knew. Her own work had helped push those advancements forward. But without Hawthorne funding, without Julian's reach, progress had been slower. And that, more than anything, made her feel powerless. She had knowledge, she had determination, but what she lacked was time, and now, she feared, Lily might run out of it. "Dr. Morgan?" A nurse appeared in the doorway. "They're just finishing with Lily now. She's asking for Mr. Snuggles," she added with a smile, nodding at the bear in Lena's hands. "Of course," Lena replied, rising to her feet. "How's she doing?" "Brave as can be," the nurse said warmly. "She told Dr. Patterson she's going to be a scientist, just like her mommy." Lena's heart twisted, equal parts pride and fear. Lily was everything. Bright, curious, impossibly strong-willed. She had Julian's piercing blue eyes and Lena's thick, dark curls. She deserved more than a life lived under genetic threat. She deserved time. Just then, the doors to a neighboring exam room opened. A doctor stepped out, followed by a tall man. Lena looked up absently, then froze. The posture, the cut of the suit, the stillness in his frame. Before she could move or speak, the man turned, Julian Hawthorne. He looked both exactly the same and entirely different. Still towering, still immaculate in his dress, but thinner now, with streaks of silver through his hair and quiet lines of pain etched around his eyes. Their eyes locked across the waiting room. Julian's widened in recognition, then narrowed, puzzled by Lena's presence at a specialized genetic disorders clinic. Before either of them could speak, another door opened. Lily burst into the room, eyes bright with excitement. "Mommy, Dr. Patterson showed me my blood cells on the computer," she exclaimed, running to Lena and hugging her around the waist, the teddy bear held tightly in one arm. "They were all wiggly and cool?" "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Lena managed, her eyes still locked on Julian's, over their daughter's head. Julian's gaze dropped to Lily, slowly taking her in, her posture, her presence, the shape of her chin. The blue eyes, his eyes. Even without knowing her age, the resemblance was unmistakable, and it hit him, not with the sharp sting of betrayal, but with the breathless weight of something irreversible. Time lost, truth withheld, possibilities shattered and rearranged in a single moment. "Lily," Lena said, finding her voice, "we should get going. You've got homework to finish before dinner." "But you promised ice cream if I was brave," Lily said with a pout, her negotiating tone eerily familiar. Julian's tone, from 1,000 boardroom battles. "Rain check, sweetheart," Lena said softly, guiding her daughter toward the exit. "Mommy has some work to catch up on." "Excuse me," Julian's voice stopped them. Calm. Deep. Certain. "I believe you dropped this." He held out Lily's bright purple hair clip. His eyes never left Lena's face. "Thank you," she said stiffly, taking it carefully, without allowing their fingers to touch. "I'm Lily," her daughter announced with cheerful confidence, holding out her hand. "I'm 5 3/4. Are you sick too? This doctor helps people like me and Mommy." Julian crouched down to her level, something softening in his expression. "Hello, Lily," he said gently. "I'm Julian, and yes, I come here to see the doctor too." His eyes flicked briefly to Lena. 5 3/4 is very grown up. "That's what I keep telling Mommy," Lily said with mock seriousness. "But she still cuts my sandwiches into 4 pieces instead of 2. A faint smile ghosted across Julian's lips. "Moms are like that, very cautious." He didn't miss the way Lena tensed, not visibly, not for a child to notice, but enough for him to feel the wall going back up between them. This wasn't a happy accident. This was the edge of something sharp. Lena felt panic rise in her chest. This can't be happening. Not here. Not like this. Lily, we really need to go, she said more firmly this time. Julian stood again, his expression unreadable but his message clear. This conversation isn't over. It was very nice to meet you, Lily, he said, voice still gentle. Perhaps we'll see each other again. Lena hurried Lily from the clinic, her heartbeat racing as she flagged down a taxi. Lily chattered the whole ride home about the test results, the friendly nurses, the cool computer, and the nice man who also came to see Dr. Patterson. But Lena's mind was a storm of possibilities. Julian knew, or at the very least, suspected. And with that knowing came consequences she couldn't yet measure. What would he do now? She got her answer the next morning. After walking Lily to school with the neighbor's daughter, Lena returned to her apartment to find the doorbell ringing. She opened it. Julian Hawthorne stood in the worn hallway of her modest building, looking thoroughly out of place in a tailored charcoal suit, his eyes steady. "How did you find me?" Lena asked, blocking the doorway. "I have resources," Julian replied simply. "May I come in?" "I think we have a few things to talk about." Lena hesitated, then stepped back to let Julian into the apartment. He walked inside, glancing around. The contrast to the mansion they once shared was stark, small but cozy, modest but lived in. Lily's drawings decorated the fridge. A few bins of neatly organized toys lined the wall. Julian turned to her, his expression unreadable. "She's mine, isn't she?" Lena didn't bother denying it. "Yes. 5 3/4, he murmured, calculating aloud. "Conceived during the marriage. Born after the divorce?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" There was more hurt in the question than anger. Lena crossed her arms, defensive. "You made it clear our arrangement was business only. You accused me of manipulating you for research. What was I supposed to say? Sorry about the trust issues, but surprise, I'm carrying your heir?" Julian flinched. "You had 5 years to reconsider that decision." "And you had a year to trust me," Lena shot back. "But you chose to believe Cole's lies instead." They stood in silence. 5 years of distance stretched between them. "She has it," Julian said finally. "The condition." "A milder variant," Lena confirmed. "We've just started treatment protocols." Julian ran a hand through his hair, the same frustrated gesture she remembered all too well. "She deserves the best. She deserves the full scope of the Hawthorne resources." "We're managing," Lena cut in. "I've built a career, a good one. Lily lacks for nothing." "Except a father," Julian said quietly. The words hit like a punch. Lena turned away, blinking back tears. "That was my choice to make. Right or wrong?" "No," Julian said gently. "It was our choice. She's our daughter." "A daughter you didn't even know existed until yesterday," Lena said, facing him again. "Your life moved on, your company, your treatments. You don't need this complication." Julian stepped forward, turning her gently by the shoulders to face him. "A child isn't a complication, Lena. She's a miracle." His voice softened. "Our miracle." Something in her broke at that. "I was trying to protect her," Lena whispered. "From rejection, from watching you die, the way I watched my mother die." Understanding lit Julian's eyes. "You were protecting yourself too." Lena nodded, a tear slipping free. "I couldn't bear it. Losing you once was already too much." Julian's hand lifted to her cheek, then paused, fingers inches from her skin before dropping. "The treatment worked." "At first," he said, "but it's been wearing off over the past year." Lena's breath caught. "That's why you were at the clinic." "They're adjusting the protocol, trying a new compound." "Are they hopeful?" "Cautiously, yes," Julian echoed. "But I've outlived their predictions by years. So there's that." A quiet settled between them. Julian's eyes drifted to the bookshelf, where a small photo of Lily sat, 3 years old, chocolate ice cream smeared across her face, grinning ear to ear. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "She has your smile." "And your eyes," Lena added. "And your stubbornness," Julian added with a quiet laugh, rough and rare, like it hadn't been used in years. "Poor kid." He turned back to Lena. "I want to know her," he said. "I've already missed 5 years. I don't want to miss any more." "It's not that simple," Lena replied with a sigh. "She's not something to be shared. She's a person, with a life, a routine, and she doesn't know about you." "What have you told her about her father?" "That he was a good man," Lena said, her voice tightening. That he couldn't be with us, but that he would have loved her if he'd known her. Julian's expression softened. Thank you for giving her that. Before Lena could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was the school. She answered immediately, her face going pale as she listened. I'll be right there, she said, hanging up. Her voice trembled. Lily collapsed during circle time. They've called an ambulance. Her hands were already shaking as she grabbed her purse. I'm coming with you, Julian said without hesitation, already moving toward the door. Too panicked to argue, Lena followed. The emergency room was chaos. Lily had been admitted immediately, the hospital already familiar with her condition. Lena provided Lily's medical history in clipped, precise bursts. Julian stayed beside her, silent, steady. And somehow that steadiness helped. When the doctor emerged, his face was serious. We need to begin more aggressive treatment immediately, he said. The genetic markers indicate the condition is progressing faster than we expected. Whatever she needs, Lena said at once. We'll try anything. The doctor hesitated. There's an experimental protocol that's shown some early success, but it's costly. It's not covered by insurance. It's only available through the Hawthorne Foundation's research program. Lena felt Julian tense beside her. Cost is not an issue, he said immediately. Dr. Morgan and I will make sure Lily gets what she needs. The doctor blinked in surprise. You're Julian Hawthorne? Yes, Julian said simply. Lily is my daughter. Recognition dawned across the doctor's face. Of course. That will simplify things. I'll make some calls and move her to the priority list immediately. Once alone, Lena turned to Julian. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Julian said firmly. She's my daughter, Lena. I'm not going to stand by and watch her suffer when I can help. Lena studied him and for the first time in years saw no distance in his expression, just raw, quiet concern. Thank you, she said softly. They were allowed into Lily's room shortly after. She looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by beeping monitors and wires, but her face lit up the moment she saw her mother. Mommy, the ambulance had a siren and everything. Lena rushed to her, smoothing back Lily's dark curls. You gave me quite the scare, sweetheart. Lily's eyes drifted past her to Julian, who hovered by the doorway. You're the man from the doctor's office, she said, pointing. Julian stepped forward, his usual commanding presence softened. Hello again, Lily, he said gently. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. Are you sick too? Lily asked, completely straightforward. Mommy says I have special blood like she does. That's why I get tired sometimes? Julian glanced at Lena before answering gently. Yes, I have special blood too, but the doctors are very good at helping people like us. Lily considered that. Are you Mommy's friend? She doesn't have many grown-up friends. Mostly just Dr. Ove, Lena from work, and Miss Patel next door. Lena flushed. Lily, your mom and I are old friends, Julian interjected smoothly, sparing Lena from having to answer. We hadn't seen each other in a long time, but I'm very glad we did, and I'm very glad I got to meet you. Lily yawned, her medication clearly beginning to take effect. You talk fancy, she murmured, like the princes in my storybooks. Julian's lips twitched. Is that good or bad? Good, Lily decided, eyes drifting shut. Princesses only kiss princes who talk fancy. As she faded into sleep, Lena and Julian exchanged a look, equal parts amusement and deep, quiet worry for the small life between them. She's strong, Julian said softly, like her mother. And stubborn, like her father, Lena added with a faint smile. She decided at age 3 that purple was the only acceptable color and has refused to wear anything else since. Julian laughed quietly. I went through a similar phase with blue, about her age. Drove my nanny absolutely insane. The lightness of the moment faded as a nurse entered to check Lily's vitals. I should call my team, Julian said. Make sure she's fast-tracked into the program. Lena nodded. I'll stay with her. Julian paused at the door. Lena, I'd like to tell her the truth when the time is right. Lena looked at her sleeping daughter, at the soft rise and fall of her chest, the faint IV beeping in the background. She imagined all the questions Lily would someday ask. Let's get her well first, Lena said quietly. Then we'll figure the rest out. The days that followed blurred together. Tests, consultations, dosage calculations, treatment rounds. Julian remained a constant presence. He used his connections to clear red tape, advocate for the best specialists, and personally oversaw every logistic. But when it came to decisions, he always deferred to Lena. Together, they built an uneasy truce, founded on one shared purpose: Lily. On the third morning, Lena arrived at the hospital room to find Julian already there. He sat in the chair beside Lily's bed, reading aloud from a picture book, his voice shifting animatedly between characters. Lily giggled at his deep pirate growl and exaggerated squeaky voices. Lena's heart clenched at the sight. They looked so right together, and the resemblance, it was impossible to ignore. "Mommy," Lily called out when she spotted her. "Julian knows all the voices for the gruff, even better than you." "High praise," Lena said with a smile, setting her bag down. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" "Better. Dr. Kate says my numbers are improving." Julian turned, nodding. "She's right. The new protocol is showing positive effects already. Her cellular response is extremely promising." Lily beamed. "Julian has the same special blood as me," she added proudly. "And he gets special medicine too. Isn't that cool?" She grinned. "It's like we match." The innocent words lingered, hanging between Julian and Lena with a quiet weight. "Very cool," Lena echoed, her voice catching just slightly. "Very cool. Why don't you watch your show for a little while?" Lena suggested, brushing Lily's curls from her face. "Julian and I just need to talk outside." She stepped into the hallway and leaned back against the wall, suddenly drained. "She's bonding with you already," she said quietly. "Is that a bad thing?" Julian asked, careful. "No," Lena admitted. "It's just happening so fast. One minute you weren't in our lives, and now you're reading her favorite books and reviewing her test results. Would you prefer I step back?" His tone was neutral, but Lena could see the tension in his jaw. "That's not fair, and you know it," she said. "You're her father. She deserves to know you. But this," she gestured vaguely, "is complicated for everyone." Julian was quiet for a long moment. "I've asked my legal team to update my will," he said at last. "Lily will be named as my heir. You'll be trustee until she's of age." Lena stared at him. "Julian." "It's not negotiable," he said firmly. "She's my daughter, my blood. Everything I've built will belong to her someday." "She doesn't need your fortune," Lena replied. "She needs stability, care, love." Her voice broke slightly on the last word, and she hated herself for it. But it was the truth, raw and terrifying. The idea of Lily becoming another pawn in a game of power made her stomach twist. "And she'll have all of that," Julian said, "along with the protection and resources the Hawthorne name can provide." Lena looked at him closely. There was more than resolve in his expression. There was purpose. "This isn't just about taking care of her," she said softly. "This is about Cole, isn't it? About keeping him from taking the company." Julian's jaw tightened. Protecting Lily and protecting the company from Cole aren't mutually exclusive. Before Lena could respond, a commotion echoed from farther down the hall. Hospital security was surrounding someone tall, with familiar features. "Cole." Julian's eyes darkened. "You can't keep me from seeing my niece." Cole was shouting, struggling against the guards. "I have a right to know about my brother's secret love child." Julian strode toward the scene, Lena at his side. "Leave now, or I'll have you arrested for harassment," Julian snapped, voice like ice. Cole's scowl shifted into a smug smile as he spotted them. "There you are, brother dear. And Dr. Morgan too. What a sweet little reunion." "How did you find out?" Julian demanded. "I make it my business to know what you're up to," Cole said with a shrug. "Imagine my surprise when I discovered your quiet hospital visits. Imagine my shock when I found out you've got a 5-year-old daughter you didn't even know about." His gaze turned to Lena. "Quite the secret you've been keeping, Doctor." "This doesn't concern you," Lena said coldly. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, but her voice stayed icy calm. She wouldn't let him see her shaken. "Oh, but it does," Cole countered. "Anything that affects Hawthorne Enterprises concerns me." "A surprise heir? That's quite the development." Julian stepped in close, his voice dangerously low. "If you come near my daughter again, there will be consequences." Cole's smile didn't fade. "Save the dramatics. The board will be very interested in learning about your secret family, especially since your so-called marriage was a sham from the start." "Get out," Julian growled. "Gladly." Cole turned to Lena. "Always a pleasure, Dr. Morgan. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again." His smug tone lingered like smoke in the corridor long after security dragged him away. As security dragged him off, Lena turned to Julian, worry rising. What did he mean about the board? Julian's expression was grim. My grandfather's will had very specific language about legitimate heirs. If Cole can convince the board our marriage was fraudulent, Julian said grimly, he could challenge Lily's legitimacy as my heir. But the marriage was legal, Lena protested. The fact that it was arranged doesn't change that. In court, maybe not, but in the boardroom and in the press, Cole will spin it as deception, manipulation. Julian ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched into his features. He's never accepted that grandfather chose me to lead the company, and now he senses an opportunity to take what he's always wanted. Lena felt a cold knot form in her stomach. So he'll use Lily as a pawn in your corporate war. I won't let that happen, Julian said, voice hardening. I'll protect her, no matter what it takes. And Lena believed him. Whatever else had passed between them, Julian's love and commitment to their daughter was already fiercely clear. Still, the realization that her child was now at the center of something so ruthless made Lena's skin prickle with unease. She had worked so hard to give Lily a quiet, stable life, and now that illusion of safety was unraveling, thread by thread. We should go back, she said. I don't want her alone after that scene. When they returned to the hospital room, Lily was still curled in bed, watching her show, completely unaware of the storm that had raged just down the hall. Everything okay? She asked, noticing their serious expressions. Everything's fine, sweetheart, Lena said, forcing a reassuring smile. Just some grown-up stuff. Julian lingered by the door, then stepped forward, something thoughtful in his eyes. Lily, he said gently, would you like to hear a story about a princess with special blood just like you? Lily sat up, excited. Is it a new story? I love new ones. Brand new, Julian replied, taking a seat on the edge of her bed. I think you might be the first person to ever hear it. Lena watched as Julian spun a fairy tale, simple, soft, and beautiful. A brave princess with magical blood, loving parents, a journey of courage, even when the parents had to be apart. It was more than a story. It was a balm, a whispered promise wrapped in metaphor meant not just for Lily but for Lena too. She blinked back unexpected tears. When Lily finally drifted off again, they stepped out into the hallway. That was beautiful, Lena said softly. I meant every word, Julian replied. He paused. Lena, we need to tell her, soon, before Cole or someone else says something she's not ready to hear. Lena nodded reluctantly. You're right, when she's stronger, we'll do it together. Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen and his expression turned tight. I have to go, corporate damage control. No doubt courtesy of my brother. Go, Lena said. We'll be fine. You've already done so much. Julian hesitated, then pulled a business card from his wallet. He turned it over and scribbled on the back. My private number, he said, handing it to her. Call me, anytime, if anything changes with Lily, or if you just want to talk. Their fingers brushed as she took the card, and for a second, 5 years of silence fell away. Then Julian straightened, the familiar mask sliding into place. I'll be back in the morning, earlier if I can. After he left, Lena sank into the chair beside Lily's bed, her thoughts tangled. Julian was back, not as a remote benefactor, but as a father. Her father. And Cole was already moving, trying to turn Lily into a weapon in his battle for control. Lena looked at her sleeping daughter, so small, so innocent, so unaware of the world already closing in around her, and as she reached out to gently brush a curl from Lily's forehead, she vowed silently that no matter how fierce the coming fight, she would not let it touch her child's heart. One thing was certain, Lena would do whatever it took to protect Lily, both from Cole's scheming and from the emotional fallout Julian might cause, especially if his health declined again. She opened her laptop and began reviewing her latest research data. There had to be a way to improve the treatment protocol. Not just for Lily, but possibly for Julian as well. Their lives might depend on it. Lily was discharged from the hospital a week later. Her condition stabilized thanks to the experimental treatment funded by the Hawthorne Foundation's program. During that week, Julian had been a constant presence, arriving early each morning, staying late into the evening, learning everything he could about his daughter through stories, crafts, games, and endless questions about her favorite things. Lena watched them with a swirl of emotions: joy, apprehension, hope, and fear. Lily had already grown attached to her new friend Julian, not yet knowing he was her father. And Julian, usually composed and reserved, was utterly enchanted by the precocious little girl who shared not only his piercing blue eyes, but his sharp mind and fierce spirit. The day after Lily came home, Lena invited Julian over for dinner, a meaningful step in whatever new chapter they were trying to write. "Mommy made purple pasta," Lily exclaimed when Julian arrived, holding out a new stuffed dragon he'd brought her. Purple, of course, and a picture book about a girl scientist. "Purple pasta?" Julian raised an eyebrow at Lena. "Boti pasta with beet sauce," Lena replied with a grin. "Looks purple, tastes great, and it's packed with vegetables she'd never touch otherwise." "Clever," Julian said with a nod of appreciation. Dinner was unexpectedly warm and easy. Lily chattered non-stop, while Lena and Julian exchanged amused glances over her animated stories. For a little while, the tension, the legal battles, and the complicated history between them faded. For a little while, they felt like a family. After Lily went to bed, Lena and Julian sat in the small living room, mugs of tea warming their hands. "Thank you," Julian said softly, "for tonight, for letting me be here, for letting me be part of her life." "She already adores you," Lena said, "which makes what we need to talk about even more important." Julian's expression grew serious. "Cole's moving quickly. He's called an emergency board meeting for next week. The agenda includes succession planning." Lena's stomach tightened. "He's trying to act before we can get ahead of him." "He thinks Lily is leverage," Julian said, his jaw tight. "He's already hinted to several board members that our marriage was a sham, that it was all designed to sidestep grandfather's will." "Well, it was," Lena said gently. "At first. But not by the end," Julian said, looking at her, his eyes filled with layers of unspoken emotion. "Not for me." Lena looked away, unwilling to dig back into the past they'd never fully resolved. "What can he actually do? Legally, I mean?" Julian exhaled. "Plenty. The will clearly states that only a legitimate heir inherits controlling interest. If Cole can convince the board, and possibly a judge, that our marriage was orchestrated solely to manipulate that clause, he could challenge Lily's status." "That's ridiculous," Lena said sharply. "She's your biological daughter, born while we were legally married." "Which is why I believe we'll win in the end," Julian replied. "But it's going to be ugly. Cole will make it public. He'll drag your name through every media outlet he can find. Paint you as someone who seduced and trapped me for money." The thought made Lena feel ill. "Lily might hear those things," Lena said. "We can't let it get that far." "I won't," Julian promised. "I've scheduled a meeting with grandfather's original attorney tomorrow. There may be clauses, precedents, something we can use." "And if there aren't?" Julian's jaw tightened. "Then I'll fight Cole with everything I've got, for Lily." The steel in his voice was unmistakable. The same force that had built a global empire, that had kept him alive against all odds. Whatever had passed between them, Lena knew, when Julian Hawthorne committed to a fight, he did not lose. "We should tell her," Lena said. "Soon, before someone else does." Julian nodded. "This weekend, if you're okay with it." "Saturday," Lena agreed. "I'll start preparing her." Julian rose to leave but suddenly wavered, reaching out to steady himself against the wall. His face had gone pale. "Julian." Lena was at his side in an instant, instinct taking over. "When did you last take your medication?" He glanced at his watch, wincing. "I missed the afternoon dose. The board meetings ran long." Lena helped him to the sofa. "Sit. I'll get you some water." When she returned, Julian looked steadier, though the color hadn't fully returned to his face. "Sorry about that," he muttered. "The new protocol, the timing is tighter." "You can't afford to miss doses," Lena said firmly, handing him the glass. "You know that. My condition is under control." "Most days," Lena interrupted, studying him carefully. "But not all." She looked at his left hand. The tremor was more pronounced, his breathing slightly shallow. "You've been having more dizzy spells," she said softly. "The treatment's effectiveness is dropping, isn't it?" Julian looked away. "They're adjusting the approach." "Julian," Lena sat beside him. "I need to know, for Lily's sake, if you're getting worse." "I'm not dying tomorrow," he snapped, then exhaled, softening. "I still have time." "How much?" Their eyes locked, and for once Julian didn't hide. "Without a breakthrough? A year. Maybe 2. Lena nodded slowly, the scientist in her holding back the emotion, even as her heart reeled. "The same protocol Lily's on. It works differently for her," Julian said. Her variant responds better. The doctors are optimistic. But not for you, Lena finished quietly. Julian reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. I've outlived every timeline they gave me, he said. Every day I've had has been a gift. But now, his voice dropped. Now I get to know my daughter. That's more than I ever thought I'd be given. Tears burned behind Lena's eyes. The idea of Lily losing him, after just finding him, was unbearable. There might be something, she said cautiously. Something we've been developing in my lab. Julian raised an eyebrow. Go on. It's a modified CRISPR-Cas9 model, enhanced targeting, tailored for our specific mutation. Lena stood, pacing like she always did when she was explaining data that mattered. The early lab trials looked promising, better response than anything in current clinical stages. How preliminary? Julian asked, instantly flipping into strategist mode. His voice was calm, but Lena could see the hope flickering behind his eyes. We need more data, more funding, Lena admitted. But the science is solid. If I could expand the lab, get faster sequencing. Done, Julian said immediately. Whatever you need, the Hawthorne Foundation will fully fund it. Lena shook her head. It can't come from you. Not directly. Why not? Because then it looks exactly like what Cole accused me of 5 years ago, she said quietly. Using your illness to fund my research, and if this works, if we publish, there can't be any doubt about bias or conflicts of interest. Julian considered that. Then we'll find a workaround. Blind funding, anonymous grants through third parties. That might work, Lena admitted. But there's another issue. She hesitated. The approach is radical. It could accelerate your condition rather than slow it down. Julian didn't blink. If the alternative is certain decline, then the risk is irrelevant. I'm a willing test subject. Julian, if your work could help others with this condition, could help Lily someday, then it's worth it. Lena saw it in his face, the resolve, the same unshakable will that had carried him through every trial before. Let me finish the next phase in the lab, she said finally. No human trials until we're sure, and Lily stays on her current protocol. Of course, Julian agreed. Her care comes first, always. And just for a moment, they were perfectly in sync. Two parents, two fighters, standing side by side, refusing to surrender to a genetic sentence. Julian stood, steadier now. I should go, it's late. At the door he paused. Thank you, Lena, not just for dinner or the science, for giving me her, for giving me Lily. She's extraordinary, Lena said with a soft smile, just like her father. Something flickered in Julian's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. I'll see you Saturday for our talk. After he left, Lena sat in the quiet. In just 2 weeks, Julian had become part of their lives again, his presence comforting but complicated. And now, knowing his condition was worsening again, she felt the weight of time more than ever. Time Lily needed with her father. Time for Lena's research to possibly help. Time they'd already lost to fear and misunderstanding. Saturday arrived, bringing a mix of sunlight and clouds, fitting weather for a life-changing conversation. Lena had prepared Lily as best she could, gently, honestly. William has something important to tell you, she'd said. Something wonderful, but it might feel a little surprising. Is it a good surprise or a scary one? Lily asked. A good surprise, Lena promised. But it's okay if it feels a little confusing. Julian arrived at noon, exactly. He came bearing lunch from Lily's favorite sandwich shop. As they sat at the small kitchen table, Lena caught his eye and gave a subtle nod. It was time. Lily, Julian began carefully, do you remember asking me if I was your mom's friend? Lily nodded, munching on a chip. You said you were old friends who didn't see each other for a long time. That's true, Julian said. But there's more to the story. Something very special your mom and I wanted to tell you together. Lily looked up, curiosity shining in her eyes. What is it? Julian's voice softened. I'm your father. The little girl blinked, her sandwich forgotten. She turned to Lena. It's true, sweetheart. Lena said gently. Julian is your daddy. Lily's brows furrowed as she processed this. Then, in that blunt, brilliant way she had, she said, But you told me my daddy couldn't be with us. That's because I didn't know about you, Julian said gently. I was away, and your mom and I weren't together anymore when she found out she was going to have you. Like Zoe in my class, Lily said, thinking it through. Her mommy and daddy live in different houses and take turns having her. Something like that, Lena nodded. But Julian and I didn't know where the other was for a long time. We only found each other again at the hospital. Is that why you have the same special blood as me? Lily asked Julian, eyes wide. Because you're my daddy? Julian smiled softly. Yes, that special blood is something that runs in families sometimes. Lily absorbed that carefully, then asked, voice small and honest, do you want to be my daddy now? Julian moved closer, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye to eye. More than anything in the world, Lily, he said. I've missed so much already, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be your dad from now on, every day. Lily looked at him for a long moment, then reached out and touched his cheek, as if to make sure he was really there. Will you live with us now? She asked. Zoe's daddy doesn't live with them anymore. Julian glanced at Lena before answering carefully. No, I'll still live in my own house, but I'll come see you a lot, if that's okay with you and your mom. Like, on a schedule? Lily was nothing if not practical. We'll figure all that out, Lena assured her. What matters is your daddy loves you. Very much, and he wants to be in your life. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing, then asked, completely serious, if you're my daddy, does that mean I can have a purple pony now? The tension dissolved instantly as both adults laughed, relief evident in their faces. Not a real one, Julian said, grinning, but maybe we can start with riding lessons, when you're feeling stronger. That's what Mommy always says, Lily huffed. When you're feeling stronger. I am strong now. She flexed her arm in demonstration. You're definitely getting stronger, Lena said. And now you have both of us to help you get even stronger. Lily beamed, her resilience on full display. Can we have ice cream to celebrate, since Julian is my daddy now? I think that's an excellent idea, Julian said. He glanced at Lena, and their eyes met, sharing a rare moment of pure joy, free from guilt, doubt, or fear. In the days that followed, a new rhythm took shape. Julian came for dinner most nights, spent weekends with them when he could. Lily adjusted quickly, testing boundaries, making requests, growing comfortable in the role of a child with two parents. But underneath that newfound stability, tension simmered. The board meeting loomed, and Julian's health was declining again. He tried to mask it from Lily, but Lena saw the signs. The subtle tremors, the fatigue in his eyes. 3 days before the meeting, Julian arrived at Lena's apartment, looking grim. What is it? Lena asked, keeping her voice low once Lily was occupied with a cartoon. Julian handed her a manila folder. Cole's been busy. Lena opened it, and her blood ran cold. Photos, timestamps, surveillance. From 5 years ago, she saw herself entering the university's genetics lab, sitting in meetings with colleagues, all carefully annotated to suggest she had targeted Julian for his condition and his fortune. This is absurd, Lena said, flipping through the pages. These meetings were about my research, years of ongoing work, not about you. I know, Julian said quietly, but Cole has built a narrative, one that makes you look like a calculated opportunist. That you engineered our meeting, seduced me, and then hid Lily from me until you needed more funding. Lena closed the folder with a sick feeling in her stomach. Why are you showing this to me now? Because he's presenting it to the board tomorrow, Julian said grimly. A day earlier than planned, and he's added another angle, claiming your current research, which uses Hawthorne Foundation resources, is ethically compromised because of our personal history. But I've been transparent, Lena said. All my protocols have been reviewed by independent ethics committees. Cole doesn't care about facts, Julian reminded her. He only needs doubt, scandal to push me out. And if he succeeded, Lena understood instantly. The foundation, the treatment program, Lily's future? What do we do? She asked, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. We fight, Julian said, voice sharp with resolve. Rebecca's been gathering evidence of Cole's misconduct for years. She came to me this morning, remorseful about her role in his schemes. Rebecca? Lena blinked. I thought she was loyal to you. She was, Julian admitted, until Cole convinced her I was no longer fit to lead. He promised her a promotion in exchange for spying on me. And now, she says, seeing Lily in the hospital changed her perspective, made her realize what kind of man Cole really is. Lena was unconvinced. Can we trust her? Her evidence checks out, Julian said. She brought proof that 3 years ago Cole tampered with my medication, swapped it for placebos, tried to accelerate my decline. Lena gasped. That's not just sabotage, That's attempted murder. And nearly successful, Julian said grimly. It cost me valuable time and set my treatment back, significantly. A cold, righteous fury bloomed in Lena's chest. Cole hadn't just tried to steal a company, he'd tried to kill his brother. And now he was threatening Lily's future. We need to go to the authorities, Lena said. Now? Not yet, Julian said, shaking his head. We need to secure Lily's inheritance first. Once Cole's removed from the board and her position is protected, then we go after him legally. I don't care about the inheritance, Lena snapped. I care about keeping Lily safe from a man who'd sabotage his own brother's meds. The inheritance is her safety, Julian said. With controlling interest, Lily, through you, can ensure the foundation keeps running, that her treatment and others like it continue. Lena stood, pacing. Frustration and worry churned in her gut. I hate this, she muttered, using Lily like a chess piece. She's not a pawn, Julian said softly. She's the queen, the most powerful piece, the one worth protecting at all costs. Their eyes locked, two parents, two minds, united by one purpose. So what's the plan? Lena asked finally. Tomorrow morning, I meet with key board members privately. Present Rebecca's testimony, show the evidence of Cole's sabotage. And if it doesn't work? Julian's voice dropped to a frigid whisper. Then I take it public. I've held back for years, Julian said. Recordings of Cole admitting to fraudulent deals. If I release them, it'll ruin him. Completely. Why haven't you used them before? Lena asked, surprised. Because he's still my brother, Julian said simply. Because our grandfather asked me to protect him, even from himself. He looked away, jaw tight. But Lily comes first now, before family, before old promises. Lena nodded, understanding the weight behind that decision. I should go with you, she said. Defend myself. No, Julian said firmly. I need you here, with Lily, protected from the fallout. He added, besides, you have more important work to do. The research, Lena realized. You still want me to focus on that? Now? More than ever, Julian said. If Cole's been tampering with my treatment, who knows how much time I've lost? Your work may be the only thing that gives me more. The gravity of that truth hung between them. Julian wasn't just fighting for a company or a legacy. He was fighting to live, to watch his daughter grow up. I'll work around the clock, Lena said. The data looks good, if I can lock down the delivery sequence. Use whatever resources you need, Julian said. I've already set up blind funding, no direct link to Hawthorne money. He moved toward the door, then paused. Lena, if tomorrow goes badly, if Cole wins, he won't, she interrupted, more confident than she felt. But if he does, we'll find another way. We always do. Julian looked at her for a long moment, as if drawing strength from her certainty. I never thanked you properly, he said. For what? For giving me Lily, Julian said softly. For giving me this chance. Whatever else happens, these past few weeks with her, they've been the most meaningful of my life. Lena swallowed hard. She needs you, Julian. Fight like hell tomorrow. Come back to her. I will, he said, to both of you. The weight of those words lingered as he left, heavy with meaning neither of them dared speak aloud. The next morning, Lena tried to focus on her research while Lily was at her half-day kindergarten. She reviewed test samples, calibrated sequencing data, but her eyes kept drifting to the clock. Julian was in the boardroom, fighting not just for his position, but for Lily's future. Just after noon, her phone rang, Julian's number. Her heart stuttered. How did it go? She asked the second she answered. Not over the phone, Julian said, his voice tight. Can you meet me? Where? There's something you need to see. 20 minutes later, Lena stepped into a quiet cafe 2 blocks from her apartment. Julian sat in the corner booth, a laptop open in front of him. His expression was bleak. What happened? Lena asked, sliding into the seat across from him. Cole was ready, Julian said, getting straight to the point. He discredited Rebecca, said she was biased, that she was bitter, claimed she had romantic feelings for me, made her look foolish. And the evidence? Lena asked, deemed inconclusive without her corroboration. Julian raked a hand through his hair, frustration etched in every line of his face. But that's not the worst of it. He had this. Julian turned the laptop toward Lena. On the screen was a research grant application dated 3 years ago, before she ever met him. It outlined her interest in the exact genetic mutation they both carried. Highlighted sections detailed the potential financial impact of successful treatment. This, This proves nothing, Lena said, confused. It's a standard grant. I submitted it to dozens of institutions. Look at the notes, Julian said, his voice taut. Lena scrolled down. In the margins of the printed application were handwritten annotations. Hawthorne genetic profile matches target, personal link worth pursuing. Hawthorne Foundation, annual funding, priority target. Lena stared at it. These aren't mine, she said flatly. I didn't write this. I know, Julian said quietly. They're forged, but convincingly. When paired with those surveillance photos, they make it look like you stalked me, used me. Lena felt nausea rise. He's framing me, she whispered, like some predatory researcher who targeted you for your DNA and your money. The board's rattled, Julian said. They've called an emergency session for tomorrow. They're considering removing me temporarily while they investigate. They can't seriously believe I orchestrated our relationship for funding. What they believe doesn't matter, Julian said bitterly. What matters is Cole created just enough doubt, and that's all he needs. Lena swallowed hard. So what now? You said there was something I needed to see. Julian's expression shifted just slightly. He tapped a few keys. A new file opened, a medical report. Lily's name at the top. Lena read it. Fast. A researcher's mind processing the numbers, the markers, instinct and intellect locking together. This can't be right, she whispered. These markers weren't present in her last panel. I had her blood reanalyzed, Julian said, by an independent lab. The implication slammed into her before he said it. Cole's been interfering, he confirmed, diluting her meds, tweaking her reports to make the treatment seem more effective than it is. Lena froze. He's putting Lily's health at risk, to manipulate you into stepping down. He knows I'd give up everything if I thought it would protect her. We need to get her out of that program, Lena said, already standing. Now. Already handled, Julian said. She starts a new protocol at the Mayo Clinic next week, totally separate from Hawthorne funding, private oversight. Lena's mind spun. Your condition, she said. Is it possible he's been continuously sabotaging your treatment too? Not just that one incident 3 years ago? Julian nodded slowly. Almost certainly. Lena's thoughts went into overdrive. That changes everything, she said. If your treatment hasn't been accurately administered, then all my data, my models, they're skewed. My projections assume resistance that may not actually exist. You think your new approach might work better than you thought? Yes, Lena said, the edge of excitement creeping into her voice. Much better. We might not be looking at extending time anymore. We might be looking at stabilizing you. For the first time in hours, maybe days, hope flickered in Julian's eyes. How soon can you test it? Quickly. Can you recalibrate? Lena asked, already calculating next steps. I'll need new baseline data, clean samples, full sequencing, and a facility Cole can't access. I have private labs, Julian said. Equipment, personnel, loyal to me, not the company. You'll have what you need. This is a race now, Lena said solemnly. Cole's willing to cross any line. We have to protect Lily and stabilize you before he causes more damage. Julian reached across the table and took her hand. We'll win this, Lena, for Lily. She gripped his hand, drawing strength from the fire in his voice. For all of us. 3 months passed in a blur. Julian stepped back from day-to-day leadership at Hawthorne Enterprises, citing health reasons, while fighting on 2 fronts, one in the boardroom, where Cole's grip tightened, and the other in the lab, where Lena and her team worked around the clock. Lily thrived under her revised treatment plan, unaware of the corporate warfare unfolding around her future. All she knew was that her father was in her life, that he read to her, took her to the park, sent silly video messages when he was away. Lena split her time between the lab and Lily, supported unexpectedly but completely by Julian. Not just a father now, a partner, a presence. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Lena stood behind the observation glass of a secured private facility. Inside, Julian lay still on a sterile medical bed. IVs connected, monitors blinking steadily. He was paler now, thinner. Cole's sabotage had done more damage than they realized. This trial was a risk. It was also their best hope. Vitals stable, Dr. Chen reported. Cellular response appears promising. Lena nodded, unable to speak. This was it. Years of data, revisions, setbacks. Her career and her heart converging in one moment. Inside, Julian caught her eye through the glass and gave her a small nod. His way of saying, I trust you. Hours later, Lena sat at his bedside, tablet in hand, eyes on the data. Julian stirred. "Well?" he asked, voice quiet but alert. "Don't keep me in suspense, doctor." Lena looked up and couldn't stop the cautious smile that formed. "The targeted cells are responding, better than we expected. Mutation recognition is occurring in nearly 40% of sample markers." Julian blinked. "Which means?" "It's working, Julian." Her voice broke with emotion. "We need more time to monitor for side effects and to confirm stability, but the early results are very strong." Julian closed his eyes, absorbing it. A long breath escaped his lips. "And Lily?" he asked softly. "Will it work for her?" "We'll need to adjust dosage, delivery, account for age," Lena said. "But yes, theoretically this could be a viable long-term treatment. For both of you." Julian reached for her hand again, weak but warm. "You did it. We did it," Lena said softly. "Your resources, my research, and the motivation of having two people to save." A quiet, comfortable silence settled between them, broken only when Julian spoke again. "I got a message from Rebecca during the procedure." Lena looked up sharply. She had never fully trusted Julian's former assistant, despite her recent help. "She found conclusive proof," Julian said. "Documentation of everything. Cole tampering with my meds, falsifying test results, even bribing medical staff." His jaw clenched. "She's taking it straight to the board chair. Tonight." "Can we trust her this time?" Lena asked, cautious. "I think so." Julian nodded. "She sent me digital copies of everything. Insurance. If she doesn't make it to the chairman, the files go public automatically." Lena considered that. "What does this mean? For the company? For Lily?" "If the board accepts it, Cole's gone," Julian said. "Permanently. Criminal charges will follow." He squeezed her hand gently. "And Lily's inheritance, her status as my heir, no longer in question." Lena exhaled slowly. "Justice," she said. "Finally. I'd give up the company and the vindication in a second if it meant keeping Lily healthy, and you. With this treatment, we might not have to choose," Julian said quietly. "We might get both." Lena heard the subtle shift in his voice, the we not just as co-parents or co-researchers. Over months of late nights, hospital visits, and hard choices, something had shifted. The old pain hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined them. They had something else now. "You should rest," Lena said, rising from her chair. "The next 24 hours are critical for monitoring your response." Julian caught her hand and held it for a moment longer. "Stay a little while?" he asked. "I've never been good at hospital rooms." Lena smiled faintly and sat back down. "I remember, you were a terrible patient 5 years ago." "I was terrible at a lot of things 5 years ago," Julian said quietly. "We both were," Lena replied. "Young, proud, scared. And now?" Julian's gaze met hers. "Older, still scared, maybe a little less proud." "Speak for yourself," Julian said with a half smile. "According to the board, I'm as arrogant as ever." Lena laughed, a real laugh. The tension in the room eased. "Lily certainly keeps you grounded," she said. "Did you hear what she told you yesterday? That your princess voice is not as good as mine?" "A brutal critique," Julian replied, mock solemn. "I've been practicing ever since." Their laughter softened the clinical edges of the room. It felt like something new, something healing. The next morning brought two pieces of news. Julian's treatment was working. The cellular response exceeded all projections, and Rebecca's evidence had been received by the board. That evening, everything changed. Cole was removed from the board, pending full criminal investigation. Julian was reinstated as CEO unanimously, and legal filings confirmed Lily's status as his legitimate heir, irrevocably protected from future challenges. Lena got the call while analyzing samples in the lab. Julian's voice was triumphant, if tired. "It's over," he said. "Cole's finished, and Lily's future is safe." "That's incredible," Lena replied, heartfelt. "How are you feeling?" Julian's voice was warm on the phone. "The treatment, it's working better than anyone predicted." He paused. "Dr. Chen says my regeneration rates are unprecedented. We need to celebrate, all three of us." "You should be resting," Lena cautioned. "Minimal stress equals maximum efficacy." Julian's tone softened. "For 5 years I've been fighting to stay alive, building a company I thought was my legacy." He hesitated. "Now I know. My real legacy is Lily, and maybe this treatment, if it helps others." Lena's heart caught in her throat. "I want to celebrate that, with the two people who matter most." The sincerity in his voice silenced any further protest. "All right," Lena said. "Dinner at our place. Tomorrow." Lily's been dying to show you her science project. Perfect, Julian said. And Lena, thank you for everything. The call ended, but the warmth lingered. It wasn't the warmth of professional victory, it was personal. The following evening, dinner was simple but filled with joy. Lily, radiant, took center stage. She spoke at lightning speed, bouncing between topics, primarily her upcoming birthday. And I want a purple cake with science decorations, she declared. And maybe a real microscope. Daddy says scientists need proper equipment. Lena raised an eyebrow at Julian. He only shrugged, unrepentant. She is mine. Might as well nurture the curiosity. Speaking of genes, Lena said gently. Lily, remember how we talked about the special blood you and Daddy share? Lily nodded seriously. Because of the genetic mutation that affects energy production. I've been reading about it in my science books. Julian and Lena exchanged glances, equal parts awe and amusement. Well, Lena continued, the new medicine Daddy's taking, the one Mommy helped make, it's working really well. And soon, you might get to try it too. Lily's eyes widened. Does that mean no more hospital visits and Daddy won't get dizzy anymore? That's what we hope, Julian said, brushing a curl from her face. The doctors are very optimistic. This calls for extra dessert, Lily declared. Both parents laughed. Later, with Lily tucked into bed, Lena and Julian sat in the quiet living room, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table, a soft breeze through the window. She's remarkable, Julian said. Brilliant, compassionate, resilient, everything I could have hoped for in a daughter. She gets that from both of us, Lena said with a smile, although the stubbornness is definitely yours. Julian smiled softly. I've been thinking about the future, he said, tone turning serious. Now that my health is improving and the company's stable. Oh? Lena kept her voice neutral, though her heart skipped. I'd like to be more present in Lily's daily life, he said. Not just dinners and weekends. Of course. Lena nodded. We can adjust the schedule, whatever's best for her. That's not exactly what I meant. Julian set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. I bought the apartment on the 3rd floor, the one that just became available. Lena blinked. You're moving here? My house is too far for day-to-day involvement, and too big, now that my priorities have shifted. He smiled slightly. Family over business. Lena looked at him, really looked, and saw that he meant it. Lily needs both her parents, Julian continued, and I've already missed too much. You're really doing this, Lena said, awe soft in her voice. The mighty Julian Hawthorne is moving into a modest apartment building for his daughter. Julian's eyes held hers. Not just my daughter. He hesitated. I wasn't fair to you. 5 years ago I let pride and fear blind me. I missed Lily's early years. I missed us, what we could have had. Lena's breath caught. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Julian said, or another chance. You've built a life, raised Lily into someone extraordinary. I just want you to know, I see it now. What matters? What I lost, and I'm trying to be better for her. And because you reminded me what love actually looks like. Lena was silent for a long moment. We both made mistakes, she said at last. I should have told you about the pregnancy, given you the chance to be a father. Why didn't you? Julian asked gently. Fear, Lena said, eyes lowering, that you wouldn't want her, that you'd try to take her, or that I'd watch you die, like I watched my mother. She looked up. And now, I'm still scared sometimes, but I've seen the way you love her, and that matters more than anything that came before. Julian tentatively reached for her hand. Where does that leave us? Lena threaded her fingers through his. Co-parents, definitely. Friends, I hope. A pause. As for anything more, we need time. Time to trust again. Time is something I have now, Julian said with a small smile. Thanks to you, and I'm a patient man, especially when the goal is worth it. The moment was interrupted by a small voice from the hallway. Mommy? Daddy? Lily in her purple pajamas clutching Mr. Snuggles. I had a bad dream. Julian opened his arms and she climbed into his lap without hesitation. What was it about, sweetheart? Lena asked, smoothing her hair. I dreamed Daddy went away again and couldn't find us. Julian held her tighter. That won't happen, Lily Bear, he said softly. I promise, I'm not going anywhere. You'll stay right here? She mumbled. Julian looked at Lena, and something unspoken passed between them. Not in this apartment, he said gently, but very close by, just downstairs. Promise? Promise, he said. I'll be so close you'll probably get tired of seeing me. Never, Lily said with absolute certainty. I waited a long time for you to find us. The simple statement brought tears to Lena's eyes. Julian looked just as moved. He pressed a kiss to Lily's forehead. I wish I'd found you sooner, he whispered. But now that I have, I'm never letting go. 1 year later, Lily's 6th birthday was everything she'd wished for. Purple decorations, a science-themed cake, and both parents, present and healthy. The party was held on the rooftop garden of their apartment building, which Julian had personally renovated as a gift to the residents. From the sidelines, Lena watched Julian help Lily and her friends create baking soda volcanoes. His hands covered in foam, his laughter loud and unguarded. His health had improved dramatically under the treatment they developed together. The therapy had since entered broader clinical trials, offering hope to others with the same condition. Penny for your thoughts, Rebecca said, stepping up beside Lena at the refreshment table. The once formidable assistant had become an unlikely ally, her pivotal testimony helping put Cole behind bars for attempted murder and corporate fraud. Lena smiled, just thinking how much can change in a year. Julian certainly has, Rebecca observed. I've known him a long time, never seen him like this. Lena had to agree. The cold, driven CEO had become someone who still led with vision, but now made time for school pickups and science fair projects. He'd moved into the 3rd-floor apartment as promised, became a daily presence in Lily's life without invading Lena's space. Their relationship had evolved too, from cautious co-parents to close friends to something tenderly more. They'd been dating again for 3 months, slowly, carefully, with therapy, with patience, with hope. Mommy, come see, Lily called, waving excitedly. Daddy made the biggest volcano ever. Lena crossed the rooftop, laughing at the sight of Julian's foam-covered hands. I see you've outdone yourself again. Go big or go home, Julian said with a grin. Isn't that right, Professor Lily? Exactly, Lily said, her purple lab coat covered in baking soda stains. Scientific progress requires bold experimentation. She sounds just like you, Julian murmured to Lena, as Lily launched into an explanation for her friends. With your flair for the dramatic, Lena teased, wiping foam from his cheek. Julian caught her hand, his expression softened. Have I told you today how grateful I am? For this? For you? Only twice, Lena smiled. You're getting sentimental in your old age, Hawthorne. Near-death experiences and discovering you have a daughter'll do that to a man, Julian said lightly, brushing his thumb over her palm. He hesitated, then said more quietly, not to mention falling in love again with the woman who saved your life. Lena's breath caught. Though their relationship had healed, neither of them had said that word. Until now. Julian, I know, he interrupted gently. Too soon, maybe. But almost dying taught me something. His voice dropped. Don't waste time on uncertainty. I love you, Lena. And this time, Lena didn't hold back. I love you too. I think I've loved you since those nights in the library. 5 years ago, Julian said softly. I was just too stubborn and scared to admit it. Before Lena could reply, Lily came bounding over. Cake time. And presents. Perfect timing as always, Julian laughed, gently letting go of Lena's hand. We'll continue this later, he added, quietly. The cake was cut. The gifts unwrapped. Lily declared it the best birthday in the history of birthdays. As the last guest trickled out, she sat between her parents on a garden bench, cradling her new microscope with reverence. This is the greatest present ever, she said solemnly. I thought the chemistry set was the greatest, Julian teased. They're tied, Lily decided diplomatically. But you know what the best present is? What's that, sweetheart? Lena asked. Having both of you here, and nobody being sick anymore. Julian and Lena exchanged a long look over their daughter's head, thinking of where they'd started, a contract marriage, a messy separation, an unexpected reunion, and where they stood now, forged through healing and hard-won breakthroughs. That's our favorite present too, Julian said. His arm extended along the back of the bench, fingers lightly touching Lena's shoulder. Later, with Lily asleep surrounded by her new scientific treasures, Lena and Julian stood on the balcony, city lights glowing beneath them. You never answered what I said earlier, Julian said, quietly. Calm, but with something raw underneath. Lena turned to face him. You caught me off guard. I seem to have a habit of that, Julian said. First with a contract, now with love. At least your timing has improved. She smiled, stepped closer, took his hands. And so have you. Julian studied her, heart in his eyes. Lena, I love you too, she said simply. I think I always have, even when I was angry, even when I thought I'd never see you again. The look that crossed Julian's face, relief, joy, wonder, made him seem lighter, younger. He pulled her into an embrace that was both fierce and gentle. I don't want to waste time anymore, he whispered into her hair. Life's too precious, too uncertain. What are you suggesting? Lena asked, leaning back. Not another contract, Julian said with a smile. Something real, something permanent. He met her gaze, unflinching. I want us to be a family, Lena. Not just for Lily, for us. Lena's eyes widened. Are you proposing? Perhaps, Julian admitted. I didn't plan to do it tonight, but Lena stopped him with a kiss. Their first since that night in the library 5 years ago. But this one was different, filled with everything they'd built since. When they finally broke apart, breathless, she whispered, yes. Then added, with a smile, on one condition. Julian raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. No courthouse wedding this time, Lena said firmly. Lily wants to be a flower girl, and I want a real ceremony, something worth remembering. Julian laughed, joy radiant in his eyes. Whatever you want. He kissed her hand. Though for the record, I do remember our courthouse wedding. It was the beginning of everything that ever mattered. Even if I didn't know it back then, Lena whispered, smiling as she rested her head against Julian's chest. Who would have thought a contract marriage would lead to this? Sometimes fate works in mysterious ways, Julian murmured. Not fate, he corrected gently, tilting her chin up. Choice. We chose each other, Lena. Through illness, through distance, through every misunderstanding. We kept choosing. As his lips met hers again, Lena realized he was right. Their love hadn't been written in destiny or sealed by legal documents. It had been forged, decision by decision, challenge by challenge, stronger for having been tested, more real for having been rebuilt. In the softly lit bedroom down the hall, Lily wasn't as asleep as her parents believed. She peeked through her cracked door, watching their silhouetted embrace on the balcony. A satisfied smile spread across her face. Clutching Mr. Snuggles, she whispered, See? I told you my birthday wish would come true. She nestled back under her covers, the happiest child in the city. And in her cozy little room, inside her father's corporate headquarters no less, 2 photos sat side by side on Lily's desk. One, a black and white image rescued from Julian's archived files. Her parents, on their courthouse wedding day, awkward and unknowing. The other, bright and full of life, the 3 of them smiling at her science fair. Her mom holding a ribbon, her dad crouched at her side, Lily beaming with purpose. The contract that had first brought them together was long expired. But what had grown in its place, love, trust, family, was stronger than any legal document, and the real inheritance they'd built wasn't measured in corporate shares or wealth. It was measured in second chances, hard-won wisdom, and the miracle of finding home in each other. Dear friend, life often writes its most unforgettable chapters in the margins between what we planned and what actually happened. In this story, what began as a cold transaction between strangers became a journey of love, loss, and redemption, proof that even in the face of betrayal, time lost, and fragile health, the human spirit can rise again. As the Stoics remind us, we cannot control what life throws our way, but we can choose how we respond. Lena chose resilience over regret. Julian chose love over legacy. And in doing so, they found a new beginning, not just for themselves, but for their daughter. Sometimes, the most unexpected detours lead us exactly where we're meant to be. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring more emotional journeys like this to life. Thank you for watching.